2011, Steve was having some issues with his body. He was noticing some parts weren't working, and he fell down at work twice in the same week. And so he decided he should go to have an MRI and get it checked out. And he found out that he had Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. So he called Hope, who had been his girlfriend for 6 months. And he said, Hope, I have ALS, and I'm going to gradually start to lose parts of my body, controlling them. And he said to Hope, it's okay if you leave. I understand. This is going to be a hard thing. And he said, but if you stay, will you marry me? So 2 months after he found that he had Lou Gehrig's disease, Hope and Steve got married.
Hi. Just in case you forgot, Atlanta is the city in the forest, and I'm just here to prove that to you. So April 2nd will be 5 years since Steve's passed, and I'm out here trying to film a video to inspire everyone to live like Steve, and mostly remind myself to live like Steve. My takeaways, and the obvious being, if you have your health, be thankful. If you can eat, if you can talk, if you can breathe, if you can walk, all of the things that our bodies just do that we take for granted every day, living in reverence of that is like Steve 101 right there. Also, the mindset, how much your mindset can take having a bad day versus having a bad life. And, he heard my grandfather one time respond to how he was somewhere between great and wonderful. So my grandfather's response always was. And Steve adopted that. So when anyone asked how he was, he would say somewhere between great and wonderful. Even though he had like 4 open wounds that day and an infection taking over his lungs, probably needed to be messed with and bothered just to be able to breathe for the day. And he still felt like he had a great life. And that. Now, we are allowed to be honest and talk about the fact that Steve also pushed me to my limits and made me meet my monsters. Hope has monsters? Say it ain't so. It's so. I really got to know myself via Steve. I knew my strengths. I knew my weaknesses. I knew what boundaries were because of Steve. I knew the capacity of the human spirit and the human body. And Steve actually is who inspired me to study herbalism and to learn how to integrate food as medicine. Steve is the main reason that I got into bird watching. So when he got stuck in bed, I started feeding the birds so they would come visit, and then we got sucked in and obsessed. And so much joy though brought by the birds. We had cherry blossoms right outside of our bedroom windows, and the birds would come hang out there and nest in there. And I swear it, y'all, nature's gonna heal the world. Truly, it wasn't until I lost Steve that I understood the grief effect. And I will say, in many ways, I grieved Steve throughout the journey, because I literally watched my husband fade and lose himself throughout the course of 9 years. And there's a lot of people who grieved him while he was alive, and I often wanted to reframe that completely to being like, he's not dying, he's living, so let's make sure we still remember the ways in which he's alive. We had a conversation one day where he said he feels like no one still recognizes how much of a spirit is still existing in him, even as he's in bed. He was too tired to type half the time, and was just so infected and wound covered and all of the things. And he just felt like people were looking at him as if he had already died, or that he was just dying. And it was a really important conversation that we had, because I just remember thinking, well, in a lot of ways, I've grieved things while he was here too, because I grieved when he could eat food with me, or when he could get out of bed, or, he could have a conversation. I grieved, like he used to do sweet things for me. And then everything he did from there on out was like needing me. So I think trying to live in the awareness of while he was alive, I wanted to live in the reverence of him being alive, in gratitude of him being alive, and reframe some of that grief that I was feeling throughout the process. That kind of thought actually helped me with my grief, because I was able to then realize how fully present I was with him, how much I tried. And like, yeah, obviously, I forgave myself for my monsters. And then when he died, I was so confused as to why I was back in the shame spiral, and had to heal some of that stuff, had to re-forgive myself. A lot of grief is forgiveness, because it just all of a sudden we're like, oh man, I wish I didn't say this or do that or this. And yeah, I think the other important part of grief, though, was to allow space for all of it. And what that means is, the joy, the finding peace in him no longer being sick, but also like missing having someone to take care of, missing having that purpose, and then just like missing his energy, because at the end of the day, Steve's energy, as much as his physical body was fading away, his energy never did. And for those who stuck around and spent as much time with him throughout all of his stages of his disease, they can say that is true. The biggest thing about grief is that there's not a timeline. And a lot of people are going to have a different experience of grief than you are, and you cannot compare your experience to other people. And I remember the first time I felt like a little bit of relief during a thunderstorm, that I didn't have to worry about Steve. And it was also, he died during COVID, and there were so many times where I was like, oh, thank God, I don't have to like keep him protected from all of this. And then I was like, ugh, that feels bad. And I had to create space for that. It was that I was recognizing the peace. You have to make space for the absolute fullness of it all, and there can't be any shame. And then I remember the first time that I like caught feelings for someone, I was like, ooh, that feels wrong, because I'm such a loyal human. And I had to then realize that that's the natural progression of my healing, is to catch feelings. I was young still. So, humans be out here humaning, and sometimes those humans, while they human, are real cute. Humans doing human things are real cute sometimes. And I just want a human with humans. I am at the Chattahoochee, not the normal spot that Steve and I used to go to where he proposed, but the closest spot to the city to where I live. And this is going to be my spot. I'm just going to be here all summer, hanging out at the river, because the river is my happiest place in the world. We're going to talk about 5 years later how unbelievably different of a place I'm in, thankfully, and how much of a testament like effort towards healing actually works. And ooh, Lord, I was just thinking about myself on this day 5 years ago, and it was the middle of COVID, and I really just was in this weird shock. Although the week leading up to Steve's passing, I knew it was coming. It was the worst I've ever seen Steve. There were so many things that were unfixable happening. He was so complicated at this point, and our team, like, I knew what they weren't saying, and they knew I knew what they weren't saying, and I was thankful they weren't saying it. And then, when this day happened, everybody was like, we kind of knew, which is a very weird, wild, interesting thing to look back on still to this day, being like, man, that girl was so in tune to that man, but also all of the things. Like, I was so intuitive, which I am now, just in a vastly different way. I remember knowing Steve would need me without him ever talking to me on his Toby or hitting his alarm or his vent beeping. Like, I would just know, because we were so connected. And it's very rare to have that kind of connection with anyone. I do feel like my clients, like, I sort of get little, something's not right. Sometimes I'll check in, other times I'll just send love. I still am pretty intuitive, but it was very remarkable the way in which I could just literally be in Steve's energy. And honestly, I think he did the same with me. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I had from Steve was the way in which, finding things to fill your cup is probably the most important lesson I've ever learned. And this is why you'll see me in nature. This is why I make art. This is why I share my life. This is why I reach out to my people. And I'm very conscientious of making sure I fill my cup. Just literally almost fell in the river. But I don't know that I would have ever found the same importance had I not been a caregiver. And this is something that I am constantly reminding my clients, my friends, the caregivers I know in life, is that sometimes we don't need things to get easier. Sometimes we just need to have more energy and love and joy in our cup. Speaking of filling your cup, I was thinking about Steve and I started documenting things pretty heavily after Say Yes to the Dress. You know, if you don't know, I was on Say Yes to the Dress. Insert clip here, I suppose.
Tell me what we have planned today.
We are on a very short time frame.
Okay. How short is
I'm
short?
getting married in a month.
1 month?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it is really, really short.
Yes. My fiance just got diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease.
I'm sorry.
My fiance is Steve December. He's just the most passionate person I've ever met. He just is a fighter. I always knew we were going to get married since we started dating, but a month ago, he got diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. It eventually will paralyze his whole body. He's such an amazing person that you kind of want to have a why him attitude, but you just can't have that with life.
We started documenting things pretty significantly, and I think it was just basically as a way to share, because people started to like really follow us and they were pretty involved in what was going on and they wanted updates, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And so as we documented, it turned into a documentary, and then we made many other short videos after that. And creating video content, I don't like the word content, it's the only thing that comes to my mind right now though. Creating video just became such a thing for me. I just have fallen so in love with it, and I still am. I am learning more of the editing because we had a great editing team with the documentary, and you know, I'm starting as a baby YouTuber. But it's creativity saved us while I was taking care of Steve. It didn't just save me, it saved Steve. He had the Drive project, would run his wheelchair through paint and paint on canvas, and it became harder and harder for him to get out of bed, but he would get out of bed. The one time I could convince him to get out of bed was to paint, and that's because that man was always all about making money. And yeah, you know, as a caregiver, one of my bigger struggles was to allow Steve to have his own journey and have a lot of say. And, you know, we fought a lot about me basically having to tell him, hey, you really need to be doing this. We're going to have consequences. And everything ended up having consequences from us not doing certain things. But there's a fine balance between being a caregiver to remind a person to do the hard things in order to stay alive, because that's what their wish is. But then to let them stay alive at their own wishes, which one of the biggest things was like not making Steve get out of bed on a regular basis, which would have been really, really, really helpful for his body, his wounds, his lungs, his everything. But that man did not want to get out of bed. And he would let me reposition him. That was like our compromise. But creativity brought me to this, and it's still one of my favorite things. And you know, it's funny, my brain will constantly think of ideas. I don't always execute them, mostly because it's like having the bandwidth and the time to execute the way my ideas work. But, you know, my hope is at some point I do have more of a team to help me execute some of these ideas, because I have really good ideas. Not to toot my own horn, but toot toot. We love spring. We love spring in the South. I love how early spring comes. When I moved to Atlanta in 2006 for grad school, I thought that I was just coming here and I was going to go back to Pennsylvania, and I had my first winter here and like really the first early spring, and I remember calling my mom being like, I'm never leaving. And as many times as I've like toyed with leaving Georgia, something about it has me in its grips, and now I'm really happy to be back in Atlanta. And it's just like, you can understand why it's possible to live in the city when like this is a 20-minute car ride from me. How how can you say no to living smack dab downtown when this is just like right here too? I love for like making video content and just putting a message together. And, you know, sometimes I come into it really clear and focused and I know what I'm going to say. And other times I just come and I'm like, hey, blah, 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 blah. And then somehow I edit it into being some sort of coherent message. At least I feel like y'all vibe with it to a certain extent. I'm really excited to start doing this like kind of content creating, which I'm sitting here journaling about, with in-person workshops. I'm doing my first in-person workshop called Pedal and Process, April 27th, 1:30 to 5:30. And I have so much just juicy, diving deep wisdom work for us to do and process. And my friend made a beautiful route through Atlanta to bike. And there's some challenges, which I actually quite love because it's teaching us all that we can do hard things. And it's really funny. He took me on the bike ride without knowing the content. He had like a kind of general idea, but I didn't tell him any of the specifics. And so we went to all the stops. And at the last stop, I was like kind of emotional. And he said, oh, was it too hard? I said, no, it's too perfect. You have no idea. Like, even the one part where it was really like not as easy as the rest, because I wouldn't say it's really hard. It's not really hard. A little bit of a challenge at the perfect time for content. I wrote about it and he didn't even know. So, I'm so excited. And the hope is that this is not just a one-time thing, that I end up taking people on multiple routes, which we already have other routes. I also already have an entire other content written for the next one. So hopefully this goes well enough that I can keep doing this. But, you know, I think this goes into like me having a lot of passion about trying to bring people to their own healed space and to their light and to their happiest place, living their best lives. And it's such a mission of mine, such a mission, that it just makes me so excited. And I think, you know, like these videos are just an extension of that. And all of this creativity stemmed during my caregiving days, because journaling and writing and like blogging and coming up with the things to talk about was really one of the things that kept me going. And now I'm living my best life and it's one of the things that lights me up. And I just think that's really cool and I'm really thankful. And thank you, Steve, and thank you, me, and thank you, you. A lot of people ask me when I miss Steve if I still talk to him. Yep, I sure do. And I was just writing him a little letter while I was sitting at the river, and the geese just like flew past me. I was about to film it, but I was like, you know what, girl, sit in the moment. That is the, where is the balance? Because I always want to like capture everything, but I also just really want to be in the moment. So sometimes being in the moment wins.
I think a beautiful way in which Steve sort of lives on through me is beyond just my appreciation for my health and reminding people to be thankful, but another way he lives through me is the way in which I am still creating. And I'm creating a reality in which I'm more than okay. I'm living my best life. And that's all he would have wanted. And I think that some of the best ways to honor the people we've lost is to live in the fullness of the fact that we're still here. And I don't know what that was. Everything that I'm sharing in terms of workshops or classes that I create is entirely based off of my personal healing journey. I don't know that people even realize how much being a therapist has helped me level up my life, because I want to be congruent. So anything that I'm suggesting my people to do, I've already kind of worked through. There's a very big way in which I miss Steve's hype man-ness. So my mom is my biggest hype person ever. And she will share all of my content. She will tell everyone they should work with me. She tags me. She does all of the things. She makes comments so the algorithm will see me. Like, bless her heart. She is just like my biggest cheerleader, and it's so sweet and pure. Steve just really was my hype man. He made everyone, including me, believe in me. And I love that, and realized that now I need to become my biggest hype woman. What I mean by that is, I'm creating all of these experiences and activities and offerings, and I got to figure out how am I going to hype them up to everyone who could receive them, because I truly believe in what I'm creating, and I know the richness of my experience that's being put into these offerings. Like, whew, I put my entire soul into anything I'm creating, content-wise, and with events, and my energy and my love is also very potent. And so when you're with me in these person events, you're going to feel that. And I really believe in it. But then when it comes time to marketing myself, I'm just like, don't look at me. So, in honor of Steve, it's going to be a focus of mine because, like I said, he wanted me to be okay. He wanted me to be more than okay. He wanted me to be here, where I am. And now, what he really wants is for me to bring the same energy that I have curated in my life to everyone and share the healing, share the growth, share the art, share the inspiration, share the love, share the energy, share it, and I'm here to be my own hype woman. Yay!
Steve, what a powerful story that you've chosen, regardless of your physical body, your physical condition. You've decided to live out the days you have for someone else.